You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and this is part 2 of 2 of the National Sports Card Convention, how it compares to a Magic event, what it kind of is. Timing-wise works out great, because you know what's this week? Gen Con. So after that, I'll be back with a retrospective on Gen Con. And before we get started, I do want to say that one of the reasons that we've been kind of branching out into these other events is because we want to speak to the larger collectible market, to illustrate how things that are going on with Magic are or aren't necessarily true in other areas of cardboard collectibles or just gaming in general. So with that, let's get it started.
So the National we talked about last week was a 4-day event if you had VIP tickets?
5 if you had VIP, actually.
Okay, so that got you in on Wednesday for a bit of time. Then Thursday, was that Gen Pop?
Yep, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was all Gen Pop.
Yep.
Saturday was the most populous day, as you would kind of expect. People with one-day tickets. It's a Midwest show, drive up, whatever. But,
and that parallels Magic events, too. Like, Friday is hard if you're not a player grinding because not very many people are going to take off of work to come out and come sell or buy, right? So when you look at this event day by day as a vendor after setup, so we're talking Thursday onward, if we say, all right, what does it look like to actually get to the event and into the hall? Is it a pretty quick and
So it was pretty much, 100 feet from the door to the door, basically. You get into the event center and then into the hall. The other problem was, as with any event at like a large city, obviously you had traffic. So getting there wasn't necessarily the best. The nice thing is Chicago has a pretty good public transit system. Now, the thing that kind of sucked was getting around once you were in there.
Okay.
First off, the AC was non-functioning, which was really bad. But it's really interesting when you just have vendors set up and you don't have a tournament space. The trade space was literally the lobby. People were just sitting down, literal floor trading there. But you didn't really have a way to direct traffic to people. The rhythm was very different. We said it multiple times. Look, rounds 1 and 2, you're going to be dead on Saturday. Once round 3 hits and people start dropping, that's when you pick up. That's when the side events happen. There's no lull there. It's just a constant surge. In fact, one of the most interesting things was on Thursday, the first person to get in line for the 9:30 hall open got in line at 6 a.m.
Jesus.
That will never happen at a Magic event.
No.
It does occasionally happen at Gen Con because you have those Gen Con exclusives that we talked about. But
so for a vendor, right, you're getting into the hall, and this doesn't happen everywhere, and I don't think anybody is aware of it. Did you have your own vendor line to get in?
So there was a vendor line to get in the morning. Now it was basically like 10 people that got there at like 8 o'clock. And then it was, okay, we have one door open with security on either side. So there wasn't like a rush of vendors, but it was literally, hey guys, come on in. You've got the badge. You can get in. And that, you do get a little bit of access. Obviously Jeter was there. The captain was around the floor before it opened when it was just vendors. So that is something that happens that, again, you don't see at Magic events. Magic events, it's just you find someone that works there and you're like, hey, where's this event? They'll say they don't know. You'll find someone else and you'll just walk through one of the doors and nobody stops you.
Exactly. The other thing that happens here and there, and this is what people might not be familiar with, is that some events in certain cities, so for instance, Boston, as a vendor, you might still have to weave your way through the Gen Pop line, but you'll go down the side of it and then you'll hit the metal detectors and the bag check, which can always be a little squirrely, because vendors' bags are generally set up differently.
A lot of vendors,
a little more green than
lot more cash, and you'll have the occasional drug scale Your milligram scale,
Yep,
just because people used to weigh that for counterfeits for power. It's still something people do for rebacks.
Yep.
There's a lot of like subtle nuance to that. Now, there were no metal detectors, but Illinois is very, no concealed carry, anything like that. There wasn't really much of a bag check after the first day. The first day, It was literally just there were cops there waving people, with their wands or whatever, but that was it.
Okay.
After that, there were about every 50 feet an armed police officer. There were signs everywhere that said you're constantly being surveilled and there are on-duty police officers here. There was a meeting with the vendors afterwards, and they estimated that there was about $3 billion with a B of merchandise in the room. So the extra security obviously makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
It was basically like, for those of you that have done Gen Con or Origins prior to this year, there's 24/7 security in the vendor hall. That's part of the contract that they sign, and the union encourages it, is, hey, we're going to have people here with your stuff constantly because we're going to watch it. And it was nice, it's nice when that happens, because you have the luxury of, man, I do not have to pack a suitcase with singles, take it back to the hotel, then leave for dinner, or take my suitcase of singles to dinner.
Yeah.
Neither of those are great options.
No.
So it was nice to have that available to just kind of chill.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And then so as a vendor, your day is just kind of straightforward. I don't know any event that gives vendors special treatment over attendees when it comes to stuff like restrooms or break areas, etc. So again, you just float through Gen Pop the best as you can, going down your streets or your avenues to find the nearest destroyed bathroom, and then back to your booth.
Yeah.
And at end of day, just as easy to get out of the net. Or do people just like leave for that event? There's no conventions. Conventions. That's the wrong word. You're at a convention.
Yeah, there's no like seminars or anything.
Yeah, no panels.
There are that's kind of when the trading started every day.
Okay.
There was an official trade night on Friday and Thursday. But really, it was all of the adjoining hotels. It was similar to like a Dragon Con, where the convention center's in the middle and there's 4 hotels connected to it by skywalks.
Yeah.
You leave and there's all of these like impromptu events that aren't really organized.
Yeah.
But there's clearly something going on.
Oh, okay.
Now, it wasn't like Gen Con where, oh, look, the lights are off. You got to get the fuck out now.
Yeah.
It was kind of, hey, guys, 30 minutes, it closes. Start making your way out.
Yep. Or we're starting the first round of day 2. Which is basically the call for everybody who didn't make the cut to get the fuck out of the room.
Exactly. Yeah. You got to go.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was how that went.
Okay, that's interesting. And I figured that would be the case, like you said. This is a sports card thing. There were TCGs there, but there's no tournament there, and with no panels, no reason to give people there a reason to stick around in the hall. It seems like half an hour after doors close, as a vendor, you could just be walking through.
Yeah.
No one. Okay, so then it's just easy in, easy out for all those days. And so after hours, each day at like an actual like anime convention, something like that, you will have an after party of some sort, or just those additional panels. Like I said, sometimes that's when they do weird things, like they'll do cosplay chess. That just takes a lot of time and a lot of space. And then it seemed like nobody really did anything. None of the vendors really did anything unless they knew each other and wanted to go out. So at the National, did anything go on after hours for vendors?
So there were a lot of like invite-only parties. Topps had a party. Panini had a party. Beckett, PSA, CGC all had parties.
Yep.
And it was, an RSVP type thing. Some of them were complimentary if you owned a store. The Panini one was $30,000 to get in. But you got like $65,000 in product for your $30,000. Yeah. They just only had so many tickets. Yeah. But the really interesting thing about these events, as opposed to like your gaming type panels, is, obviously you go to a Comic-Con, you go to a PAX, you go to a Gen Con. You expect some kind of news from like Wizards of the Coast. Like you expect a presentation.
Yeah, something's going to happen there.
There was no presentation really. It was literally just a meet and greet, more or less, where Beckett covered the liquor bill or Panini covered your food and alcohol or whatever the case was. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because those events were a lot more. I'm someone who works here, and I may have some loose lips to let some things slip.
Yep. Yeah.
Or I may be networking to get more money out of your store at a future date, like to sell more product.
Yep.
Or it was a lot more, and I don't mean this in a bad way, salesman-like in nature. There were a few Beckett employees that were talking about what CGC recently did, getting rid of the 0.5s and just bumping everything up to a whole grade. And how they may have heard that there were internal discussions about that, just stuff like that. And it was just really interesting to see that because, again, like the panels at a PAX or an ASEN or a Gen Con are very specifically geared towards something.
Yeah.
Hey, how to establish a community at your store, how to defeat a billion-dollar corporation using social media, like whatever the case is. That's actually a panel at Gen Con this year, by the way. Everyone should check it out. I bet it's about Wizards of the Coast and the OGL. But it was a lot more loose. And, hey, show up at 6:30. We're not really shutting this thing down till whenever. Whereas at the gaming stuff, it's a lot more, look, you got 9 to 11, then you got to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Dragon Con, even the Cosplay Deviants after party on Friday, still ends at like midnight 30. And it's a hard midnight 30 it's over. And that was kind of the interesting thing about it. The other thing is compared to a Gen Con or a Dragon Con, it's not 24 hours. You look at the panels at those events, whatever events you can get tickets for, there's actually stuff going on 24/7. You can literally 24/7 go do whatever you want. May have like an hour pause between where they have to clean or whatever, but that wasn't the case here. The other thing is being, and I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this working anime conventions, being that 10 to 6 show, you just have a lot more freedom to do stuff and sleep or eat or get a good meal. And it really does put everyone in a better mood for all of those extracurricular activities.
Yes, yeah.
It was just really nice to see because when you work at a MagicCon now, if you're in the extended hours room where you're there till 11 at night, like it's brutal. But it was nice to see that as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned like the Panini stuff and there was a CBA on their ticket because you're going to get merch ahead of that. I saw from the National somebody posted silver packs from Topps.
Yes. So there is at the National, and this is a way to encourage people to buy product. Basically, all of the manufacturers, Leaf, Panini, Topps, all those guys that make the game or make the cards.
Yeah.
Have redemptions that you can get from their booth. And it's basically, hey, show us that you purchased this box and opened all of your packs. You give us the wrappers, we'll give you this national exclusive item for it. Now, the really interesting thing that does is similar to like a PAX, there's obviously a secondary economy on that stuff, just like the pins.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is you have numbered cards in those, and once those are hit, the value can go down. But you have the secondary economy that also encourages vendors who are partnered with those manufacturers to bring product and sell it at a markup because you want those national packs.
Yep.
There was, people, they limited how many an individual could redeem. So there were literally breakers there that were handing people boxes. And when they would bring the product back, they'd be like, here's a free box of some other product.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of really cool stuff going on there for attendees and vendors in addition to exclusive like that is obviously, that's a bonus for attending. That's a bonus for participating, but it's cost gated. You have to spend money on it.
Yeah.
There's some of the displays. There were original Andy Warhols for sale. They had the Joseph Gordon-Levitt Robot Chicken Magic card, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So there was some gaming there, but it was that higher end. There was a booth that had a set of, I think it was PSA 8 Ponchu Pikachus. Just chilling. That's like a $15,000 set. But you have that going for you, and you also have these redemptions. So it creates this almost subculture to the event, similar to PAX with pins, where you have people for years and years like, oh, I have all the first year Overwatch pins. All right, well, I have all of the 2017, here's my sealed national pack still. It's just some really interesting things to see. And for a manufacturer to say this event is so important to us, we are going to brand a product for it. I cannot imagine something like that happening in gaming outside of Lorcana, which has already started doing it and has an insane market for their promo stuff. But that's something that I wouldn't be surprised at the rate things are going, that Wizards is just like, shit, let's bring HasCon back. We're doing more HasCon exclusives, but we're doing them right, because the gift set was not it. I'm sorry.
The Magic set, you mean? That they gave away? Yeah. That was a little weak. I mean, financially it made sense at the end of the day, but it didn't hit everybody.
It was like, here's some of our other IPs on Magic cards, which is, I don't know, it's such a weak thing to do. Like okay, I have to hit on one of those IPs enough that I care to buy it despite not needing or wanting the other two cards.
Exactly.
It doesn't feel good.
Yep. Or be interested enough in Magic to want to enjoy the IP that I like on that. Excluding the crossover between D&D and Magic with the sword that was in there.
Yeah.
Like, there was the Nerf thing, right? There's a My Little Pony card.
And there was the Grimlock.
And the Grimlock, yeah. So it's just like, you look at those other three IPs, and like, trying to get that crossover into Magic seems a lot more difficult than one would want. So I thought we would have seen some more interesting branded stuff from there, but like, you have all these interesting IPs and Mr. Potato Head, so you literally have a blank canvas to work with. Like,
literally,
that seemed like the coolest thing you could be doing at every HasCon, is just you make some weird exclusive Mr. Potato Heads.
Yeah. Like, here, in whatever you want. Here's a Twilight Sparkle Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah.
What?
Exactly.
That's so dumb I have to own it.
Exactly. And there are only so many made, and like, there you go. Now you get some weird crossover. I mean, you could do it vice versa. Like,
yeah.
You know, crossover your Transformers and your MLP or what have you. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Give a Twilight Sparkle that transforms into a semi.
Yeah, exactly. So, as a vendor, then, any interesting things that you saw or received was basically after hours, like you said, through those OEM kind of things.
And a lot of them were distributed through your distributor, where they said, hey, here's a packet of your Nationals invites.
Yep.
One of the other interesting things about the National as an event, as opposed to some gaming events, the committee that runs it is actually the vendors that set up at it. Once you set up at the National, you are now a voting member of the National Sports Card Convention Board. And they vote as a body on where events are held, what contracts they take up, what kind of corporate sponsors they're going to allow. So it really does lead to this like investment by vendors, because I have a vested interest in this now, because these decisions impact how much money I can make.
Yep.
If I'm going to go to a city that's awful to get to, like Charlotte, I need to like have a say in that and how I'm going to be compensated for the lack of sales associated with it. And that's something that just, you know, as a vendor at a gaming event or anything, it's literally just PAX or, you know, Reed Pop or whoever is just like, get fucked, find somebody else.
Yeah.
And that makes it very difficult, because there's a lot of like, I don't want to say unfair practices, but there's a lot of things that those companies do that don't make sense as a vendor. That it's just like, all right, well, you're totally like hamstringing my ability to make this event profitable, and that doesn't feel good.
Yep.
So it's just very interesting to see that.
Yeah. Now, is the National attached to Chicago, or does it move?
It moves. So the last year it was in Atlantic City. This year it's in Chicago. Next year it's in Cleveland. And they book in 3-year blocks. So by the time Cleveland happens, we'll know the next three.
Yep. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I know there's some non-trading card, non-collectible stuff conventions that do that. They book years out, but to quote like keep it fair and accessible, they move it to like large tourist destination cities. So you'll see Vegas, New Orleans, LA, like that
Orlando,
kind of stuff.
New York.
Yeah, exactly. Like large airports, easy to get to, because you're coming in, and these are like, in my experience is in the tech sphere. So you're just coming in. Like, let's say you're not a presenter, you're not a vendor, then it's convenient to you because it's a large airport, easy to rent a car or take public transit or wherever you're going. If you're going to be presenting or you're going to be a vendor, then you can pallet ship your stuff there pretty easily because, again, major airport for freight. And overall, it should be a nice, tidy kind of experience.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the important things when you look at the evolution of Magic events is when you had a Grand Prix every weekend, pre-COVID, there were some cities that you knew were going to be bad.
Yeah.
And you were like, that's awful to get to. It's not close to any major cities. I just don't want to do this. Like Tulsa, nobody cares about Tulsa. Yeah. Like Oklahoma City is better because there's a regional airport there. And you had to plan that a lot differently because when Channel was running the show, it was West Coast, East Coast, Europe, West Coast, Midwest, Japan, like all over the place. And you have to plan for that. And having, the way it looks now, all of the Magic Cons are in fairly accessible cities. Minneapolis may be the one exception, but their airport's actually very large.
Yeah.
It is fairly easy to get there by plane. So you kind of see how that location plays into it and into the quality of the event. Because I'm sorry, like you can go to Charlotte all day long. You can go to Richmond all day long. Those events are bad.
Yeah,
they're not good
really,
cities
really
to go
bad.
to.
I mean, but that was the thing. We knew that, like, so you mentioned Channel and their location events, but even before that, when we had multiple TOs,
Legion, Channel, PAX, PES, everyone.
The Channel suite you basically had to buy into, and that got you like one or two good event locations, but then you had to pick up like Salt Lake City, which was a notoriously bad spot. And I think like Phoenix was, again, like you would think Phoenix would be good, but it's just not a Magic city.
No.
And like that's what happened. Like sometimes that would happen. You would think, oh, we're going to this neat city. The first time you go, there's got to be a lot going on, and then you get there, it's like,
there's amazing. No, it's dog shit.
Yeah, there sure is a lot going on in the city, which is where you would rather be compared to the convention center because nobody else is there. Like, and it's just weird. Nebraska was surprisingly decent. The one that I did
Nebraska, there was a GP Omaha that I did that was actually insane. I don't understand how, because that's just not that's not where I would think an event would be good.
Yeah.
At all.
I'm pretty sure that was the same Nebraska that I did. Like, I had to get the playmat from that. It was like one of the, like, I don't do that often, but I was like, I got to get a playmat. It's just mono corn. And it was like in the one that I did was like in the middle of the winter, and you walked, it was just across the street, and it was impossibly cold to just go from one side to the other. But the event, it was just like wire to wire. It was but the other thing is, it was also a modern Grand Prix. So people were coming out to that already. That was when, like, the last Grand Prix before the pod banning, I think.
Oh,
that's the one that I did there. Yeah, exactly. And like that event just kind of like for a while it blew the doors off it, but it emptied out pretty quickly. Like I think that was the trade-off, was you had a really good like Friday, Saturday, but then like Sunday was
like, dumb. Was a Midwest Sunday. By 2:00, everyone's leaving. It's dead.
Yeah,
you can pack up and go.
I think I'd mentioned this anecdote before. Our booth was like next to the feature match area, but directly across the hall from us was Dan Bach. And Dan was using a projector on the wall for his prices, and on Sunday the screen shrunk really small, and we could watch the baseball game that was going on. Yeah, because there's nobody there. There's nothing to buy, basically. So he just had like baseball.
I guess we'll just watch baseball.
Yeah,
sick.
Exactly. So like it does play in like that too. Like the city could be awesome. It's poop, and it is what it is. So it'll be neat to see, especially with the national and events like that, as they travel, like how things happen. As an attendee, though, for an event that's that large with 600,000 square feet, was it like packed all the time? Like Anime Expo is ridiculous. They'll never get another place in LA because I don't think there's a place that can hold it outside the Staples Center and like the 3 adjoining
buildings to it. Yeah,
basically. And it is just it is like permanently clogged.
Yeah, I mean it is slammed packed. From open to close.
Yep.
The really interesting thing, and I will say this to anyone, is contrary to like any anime events I went to where I felt like I was able to see everything, I actually don't think I got to see everything. Yeah. Over 5 days, I don't think I saw it all. I told a lot of people, from around here that were going to it, I was like, treat it like the Louvre.
Yeah.
You can't see it all in one day.
You mentioned that last week.
Yeah. And the other thing is, as like a customer, I didn't even know I wanted half of that stuff. I didn't even know what would be there. When I saw the JGL and Evan Goldberg, and they had a bunch of like playtest cards and stuff, I was like, I never even thought to think this could be here.
Yeah.
You know, they had obviously some really cool memorabilia, old tickets. Someone had a picture frame of Michael Jordan rookies where the outside of the frame was PSA 10 Michael Jordans, and then there was a fake big one in the middle.
One in the middle, yeah.
That was like a $2.4 million frame. They had original props from the Adam West Batman show that were coming up for auction at Heritage, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
It's very hard to keep the idea of what you're going to get going in there and maintain this is what I am here for the whole time.
Yeah.
It really does, you know, every time I go, it really does feel like your first Gen Con all over again. Because the difference between, you know, not just the established market that sports is, but the age of the market is there's people there that have been setting up for 30 years and have never brought the same thing twice. Because there's just so much. And I can't imagine how much better, you know, when we did the Origins recap episode, if Origins cycled everything out every year, if Gen Con cycled everything out every year, people would be so much more excited for that event to go see it. I remember distinctly on the Channel Fireball circuit when they controlled all the GPs. There were plenty of people that were grinding GPs trying to get to the Pro Tour that went to like 2 a month. And the amount of times that I heard, hey, I saw this in your case last show.
Yeah.
Like, man, that just feels so bad.
Yep.
As a vendor to see that. And honestly, as a player to know, hey, I recognize this brand. I recognize the people here. I like them. But also when I get there, I see the exact same cards in the case that were there last time. That feels really bad.
Yeah,
as
for sure.
a customer, and you don't really get that at the National.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is, as a customer, and this is true of any event, make sure you take breaks for lunch.
That's fair.
Because it can get bad.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. No, that's cool to think about as an attendee what it's going to be like there. It does sound in that way. Also, like. So when Channel Fireball was doing everything, when Pez was a TO, you could expect the same thing from both of those groups because the Pez kit was basically just old-ass sealed product, which is cool, but nobody's buying Urza Saga on the floor of the GP, like a sealed box. And CFB was just sending their kit. I can't remember how it was explained to me. Like the buys from every show would like replenish some stuff in the case and then be sent back, I think, to the warehouse.
Yeah,
and
they stored it at the warehouse rather than shipping it from location to location. They shipped it back to the warehouse, and then it would ship to the location after they inventoried it basically, or reset it.
Yeah, but even though it was going back to the warehouse, or some amount was, and then there was something new waiting for those guys at the next location, it was very much the same kit every time. And there is something to say about that. That's kind of like the franchise model you see, where it's just like, you want to give your customers an experience they can trust and expect, and a quality of engagement that they can expect each time. And so they basically just begin to associate your brand with quality for that. But for the people that are grinding and just have nothing to do and they're like combing booths or whatever, then definitely it absolutely becomes an exercise in futility to go through those few booths like that are pallet shipped. But everything else kind of speaks to the way the National goes. And that's not something I can actually say about anime conventions. And the reason for that is because that scope is so limited for the people that are there that you very rarely get a fair number of booths that step either back in time and bring out nostalgia pieces or step outside of current pop culture and bring some like underground stuff, because that's not how you make sales. And So not only are you seeing repeat products, so the booths start to look the same. Anime events, just like New York Comic Con, and I can't say this for sure about San Diego, but I expect it to be, all have those dumbass t-shirt towers.
Oh God,
That like
yes.
sit on corners or take up like half an island that people can walk through.
Yeah.
And you think they all look different because the outsides of each one are decorated slightly differently, but you realize they just move the inventory from the inside to the outside or vice versa. So it's actually all the same. So a lot of that floor does start to feel the same and is only really broken up by the sponsorship booths.
Yep.
Bandai, Konami, Funimation, FHE, etc. But
Yeah.
you don't get that at like the National. You don't get that at Magic Cons. Those large booths that you have at Magic Cons are just vendors vending, and they do break up the monotony of like the sea of little guys, sure, or just like, you know, what is it, like 8x4s, the tables, 8x2s.
So. But my favorite is every time I see those, I'm just like, man, that is the perfect setup for a cage match.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Can we just set a mat in there and just go ham? I just want to see all of those booths in like a battle royale cage match. Last man standing takes all the t-shirts.
Nobody remembers what the first season of Jackass was like, but that is the perfect time for two people in knight armor to run in from both sides, like point at each other and then throw down.
Yep.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the first season of Jackass, because that's like an every episode, maybe twice an episode thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so it's exciting to hear that, like, even in a room that's that large, it doesn't feel like you're kind of copying and pasting things around, that you don't need these giant booths to kind of break things up or like give up the idea of like multiple entities kind of in a similar space, but we're not the same, we promise. And because this is an industry that has been going for so long, the nostalgia pieces are expected. And as it is a collectible, and there are enough generations that have been doing this, people are bringing in ancillary collectibles as well.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I speaking of ancillary collectibles, something I got from one of the booths was a playbook from one of the offensive assistants from Notre Dame in 1942. Even had provenance. That's the equivalent of someone coming in with the first rule book that Richard Garfield wrote on a bar napkin.
Yeah.
And having it for sale at a booth. That's, I like misprints. I like artifacts from Magic's history, the test prints, stuff like that. That's really cool. But that's not something that you'll see a lot of, even at a Gen Con. Mm-hmm. And it's just really cool to see the equivalent of that kind of thing go out there. It's basically, imagine if the vendors were just the Gen Con board game library, where it's one of everything that's ever been demoed at Gen Con. Just insane the amount of history and stuff that was there, and that was just really cool to see.
Yeah, no, it is definitely worthwhile, and I think the longer the National goes, the more we're going to see those ancillary collectibles kind of plug in.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure, like you mentioned the Poncho Pikachus, and so obviously there's going to be more high-end graded stuff there. I assume eventually, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Will pick up a little more prominence
there were
as
people
well, like
with
old
graded
Yu-Gi-Oh! With graded. Yeah.
Yeah, like someone had a first ed LOB set.
Yep.
Which first set ever, for those of you that don't know, first edition. It wasn't graded, but they had it there. Yeah. They had, obviously, Pokemon has a crossover with every collectible now. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there was even like old TV show trading cards, like just really cool stuff.
Yeah. Like that was popular. I don't know if it's the 60s through the early 90s or stuff like that, but like TV shows and movies.
There were Mork and Mindy cards. Yeah. No Robin Williams autograph though, sadly.
Oh, that's a bummer. But yeah. And so, like, I'd actually almost expect it to see at some point in time, like, I know the retro gaming communities have their own events, but they all seem to be fairly small and regional. But I would expect at some point in time to see not a lot there, but some of the hard-to-find stuff, like that Nintendo game there's only, like, 2 of. Might end
the
up
Olympic
there.
sports or whatever.
That's what it is. Yeah. stuff like that. Some of the actual like rarities and nostalgia pieces, maybe just like a garbage bag full of Atari ETs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
like, that's the kind of thing that I would love to start seeing at, Gen Cons and stuff like that. And I will say, obviously some retro communities have their gaming championships at Gen Con. There's still the 90s L5R game still has world championships at Gen Con.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to see something like that branch out. And obviously we have Eternal Weekend for your older formats for Magic. I would just love a convention for Magic where it's like, here is Pebbles era extended. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a big community grassroots movement for GOAT and Edison, which are formats that were a specific time period of Standard. I would love to see an event like that where it's, here's Lorwyn Standard. It's Ravnica Time Spiral Standard, whatever.
Yeah, celebrated eras where people can just come in and play these cool eras of the game and not just like Gavin Verhey's like...
Here's my middle school presentation or what pre-modern whatever.
Yeah, like here's a bunch of test cards, go have fun. Like that event. Yeah, instead of doing that and working on that, just do something cool with the community, for the community, as you have all these interesting eras of the game taking place. No, I get it.
Yeah. That would just be really cool.
Yeah. Anything else before picks?
No, let's get it started.
All right, cool. I'm going to go first so you can yell at Clouds.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
All right. So this week for me, I am looking at Black Market, specifically from Mercadian Masks, and this is a fantastic enchantment. 3 double black. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add 1 black mana for each charge counter on Black Market. It's very simple, very elegant. I added this to my list to watch. Late March, and CK was buying 10 at $5.30. There were 98 on TCG Player at $8.68. When I was taking my notes, CK was buying 22 at $4.80, so their quantity doubled, their price dropped, and there were 105 listings on TCG Player for $8.76, so we were seeing a little bit of a bump there. As of today, I think about 2 weeks after taking my notes, a full week after our patrons got this, CK is buying 19 at $5.20. So we're just about back to where we were in terms of price on the Mercadian Masks Black Market, while the buy population is going down. So I would recommend that you start looking to get out of this. When we take a look at this card in Commander and its playability, this goes into any deck that can take advantage of a burst of black mana each turn. Pretty straightforward. Across the format, Black Market is a card that allows you to move from the early or mid game to the end game in pretty swift fashion in hopes that you can close out before you lose out on the mana gain. So basically, you can win before other people catch up to what you're doing in terms of the mana that you are able to accrue each turn. So how you get there and what you do once there, however, is kind of what makes this card really interesting. If we want to stay really on the nose, so to speak, we'll look at cards that represent removal of any sort, that those being single target, board wipes, everything that just can continuously clear out creatures for the first few turns of the game that cost between like 2 and 4. And this is where we see Black Market flex into decks that also run white or red, and you basically want to take over the board and win, most likely with a few big creatures shortly thereafter. So, like I said, we're going to be spending a lot of time in that 4 mana slot. So that's Damnation, that's Damn, that's Wrath of God, that's Day of Judgment. In red, that's like Blasphemous Act. You have Shatterstorm, which is a really weird way to do it as well. And then some other random pieces of damage-based removal from red. If you want to dive a little deeper, we see decks that muck around in the graveyard, not just with like the obvious Reanimate, but going a little further with Victimize and Village Rites, cards that ask you to sacrifice creatures as part of the cost. And this allows you to add an additional counter to Black Market on your own as you are reanimating or drawing additional cards. And if you look down the list on EDHREC, you're going to see a lot of this kind of effect in like every slot. Not every slot. Instants and sorceries that do like everything you want between card draw, reanimation, discard, etc. And removal. It's all there. And then looking at pairing green with Black Market, we see a token sub-theme, which does work well as tokens entering the graveyard will still trigger Black Market. And the Aristocrats package also works well, so we can extend our utilization of them in that direction as well. You don't need Damnation or Mutilate when you have a bunch of token generation, token doublers, Grave Pact, and a sack outlet. It really doesn't take that much to get that engine kind of humming. And as we're breaking down how this pairs with themes and colors, blue is really just bursting out to be a pain in the ass with cards like Psych Rift to have additional ways to stifle other players' progression and take over the game that way. So you're just killing creatures to play Psych Rift and then win the next turn like pretty quickly. So all in all, this plays pretty well at all levels of Commander, from casual to more competitive, and that broad appeal is really what we're looking for when it comes to cards like this. As far as the timeline is concerned, the market price is fairly incorrect based on the prices we see on TCG Player, and it's actually masking the fact that we can arbitrage directly to CK for profit. When I was taking my notes, and I believe that's still today, if we look at this card on TCG Player, the market now says $8.78, but we can buy LP copies. Let's see, what's the cheapest one today? The cheapest LP is $4.92. That is immediate arbitrage to Card Kingdom, and this is not unique. This happens a lot. That's the reason I picked this card, and I didn't want to mention it up top. Those numbers look like fairly innocuous, but it's, for whatever reason, there's just this problem, and it's most likely like, I like to refer to it as a TCG direct bug, where people are just buying copies of cards at a higher price because it comes recommended from either someplace off TCG Player, and it pushes you through direct. You're already shopping direct, so you've got it filtered, and thus you're just going to pay more for the direct premium, or you're using the cart optimizer, which does some really funky things with pricing. So people are willingly spending more money on this card than they need to be, pushing the market price up, when in reality you can buy this cheaper and just push it straight to Card Kingdom. Right. So as cheap copies are removed from the market, the price will eventually begin to reflect this, and we should be able to reroute these copies back into the open market, which is probably the next 3 to 6 months, as velocity is a bit slow overall on this card, right? So we can take the low-hanging fruit, push it to CK for either like actual profit or just one-to-one in credit, or we can just sit on this and keep buying out the low-hanging fruit over time, and then pushing it back through the market when it's actually an $8 card instead of the $5 card that it truly is when you look at these prices. And this timeline should actually also apply to all other versions of Black Market, as they share a similar delta in price from TCG Player to CK. And I also think this is a card that can definitely get the content creator bump, but it seems like that's a far-fetched idea at the moment. Even on like the all Nazgul week that Commander Clash did, no one seemed to be playing Black Market for some reason. It just seems like it's this kind of no-go thing anymore.
It was just, I don't understand that, because to me that was the literal perfect time to do it. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's just like, maybe it's just people find this, like creators find this too aggressive, too abrasive. I don't know. Like, it just seems like there are a lot of opportunities for this to be played, and it's just kind of a swing and a miss overall. Yeah. Reprint equity. This basically lives in Commander products, and while that does happen from time to time, predicting when it's going to catch a reprint is an extremely hard bargain, but demand for this is pretty steady after a reprint, so I wouldn't be worried if the cadence did eventually pick up on this. I think we saw one in like 2017 and in like 2015.
Yeah.
And a jump start. 2015, 2017, Battle for Baldur's Gate, which is like 5 years later, and the original Jumpstart. So like that's really weird to figure out. As far as buy quantity, I own copies from all the Commander sets because it's the product I buy. Like, it was the collections I was buying, so I probably have like somewhere in the neighborhood of 6, and I'm really happy staying here. If you can move these locally, if you actually have players that are willing to pick them up, I'd probably move to about a dozen. But if your out is buy list or mixing the two, then going higher across more versions might actually be the play.
I think this is a great pick right now, especially because the one time where we could expect it to be reprinted, obviously Commander Legends, it wasn't. Nope. And this is a card that Wizards has clearly like had an inclination to reprint before.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see that this is a card that people haven't really hopped on. Because obviously, everyone's like, oh, this got crunched out, that got crunched out, invest in this, whatever. And that's just not happening with this. So it's been really interesting, especially, I mean, they had Nazgul Week. They had a perfect opportunity to have Black Market showcased. And this is one of those cards that I think it might be lost in the shuffle of all the hype, stress, pissed offness, whatever, over, Commander Legends, Lord of the Rings, and Doctor Who all back to back to back.
Yep.
And this seems to me like something that's kind of fallen through the cracks.
Yeah, everybody wants to play Coffers and Urborg. We know how powerful that is, but if you're going to sit there and you're going to play removal, like...
If you're running Altar,
yeah,
any of them.
Yeah.
Dementia, Ashnod's, whatever. There's just so many ways to turn this card on.
Or if part of your game plan, like I mentioned with Aristocrats, is Grave Pact or Dictate of Erebos, then this card is perfect in that shell as well. Because it's just going to allow
Rite of Flame, but better.
Yeah, it's just going to allow you to further your game plan, push your game plan a lot faster. And so what if it gets blown up in time? Like, all it did was just play alongside your natural game plan. Yeah. All it did was ask you to continue playing the game the way you were. It's not asking you to do anything else beyond that. It just is a 5-mana enchantment and hooty hoo. Like, cool. So... that's what I got. You're here to yell at some clouds today, so let's go.
I am. So obviously, Modern Horizons 2 cards are surging. It's a great time to have Modern Horizons 2 cards. Well, a little email from my distributor told me it's a great time to sell these cards because there is, according to Southern Hobby, not a restock, a reprint wave coming. It is supposed to release in September, which means we got about a month left. Fury is a prime example that I'll go for here. This is a card that has seen a steady incline in price. It's increased in a fairly linear fashion. It hasn't surged because it spiked things. It's just been on a steady upswing since the set released.
Yep.
Ragavan got banned and still held some value. But there's a lot of cards in this set similar to Fury that have just had this steady incline where honestly they're probably at about the right price long term. But once this reprint hits, it's going to go down, especially considering the timing of the reprint seems very strange since Modern Season is just about done.
Yep, as far as we know, a Modern Season...
that indicates to me demand is going to go down.
Yep.
And if demand is going down while supply is going up, it's just simple economics. Supply has exceeded demand, the price is going to go down. So if there is anything out of Modern Horizons 2 that you've been kind of holding, that you've been sitting, be it dress down even, now might be the time to start looking at kind of moving that because we know on the horizon there is a decline. Not only that, if we're leaving Modern Season, we've also got the holidays coming up when, guess what? We're going to have a decline. So now would be the time to start moving off of this kind of stuff. This is a modern staple from MH2 or just a staple from MH2 in any format. I don't exactly see a bunch of Cabal coffers running around, but it's definitely in the set. This would be the time that I would say, you know what? I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I think I'll move off of it and move on and try to leverage it into anything else at this point.
Yeah.
It's something that a lot of people in the MTG finance sphere have said, oh, these cards are great. You need to pick them up. It's Modern Season. They're super liquid. No, just sell them. Just get rid of them. Get something out of them. Hopefully you profit. Obviously, this isn't like a sky is falling, magic is dying moment. I mean, that's just generally true. But in this case, with these cards specifically that were for a very long time seen as some of the steadiest holds you could have outside of the reserve list, well, guess what? If we've got more coming, it's only going to go down.
Yes.
I just don't think it keeps that price up. Not to mention, the set's been out for 2 years now. Everything is kind of established. We know what cards are good. We know what cards are stapled. There may be some cards that are like hiding out somewhere, waiting for one other card to release, but this might be time to just call an end to those MH2 specs. Yep. And I just wanted to call that out while there's a little bit of time ahead, because we were told the restock is, quote, decent. Whatever that means in distro speak. That's not good for the price of these cards short term.
Yeah.
Long term might be fine, but in the short term, this might be the time to get out of it.
Yep. No, I like the calls to sell, and this is one that we've been kicking around for a while because that email from Southern was not like damning's the wrong word here. It was just
it was bad optics.
Yeah, especially
I think for the financial aspects, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's also weird that we're getting this reprint after the Modern Pro Tour. So it's like, okay, so we talked about Modern season effectively coming to a close. We just had the last Pro Tour of this year, and the first Pro Tour of 2024. The location has been announced, but the format has not. So that means that the RCQ formats and thus the RC formats are not announced because, and I had to double check this today, they should be tied to the upcoming Pro Tour or Limited. Your choice, right? And between now, basically the end of the Modern Pro Tour until Pro Tour Chicago in January of 2024, we have 2 standard sets released, 2 yet released in 2023, and then after. So that's Wilds of Eldraine and the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And literally after Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we have no set information for 2024. And we have no event information after Chicago, aside from Worlds. Right? And that's it. And even the information that we have about Chicago and Worlds, super, super, super light. So the opportunity cost here of this event being Modern compared to Standard or Pioneer is really high. Sorry, really low for WotC. Super low. Nobody's going to care unless these sets just absolutely change the format, right? It's really high on Pioneer and Standard because you've got 2 brand new sets. They can actually change Pioneer, and you'll have a brand new Standard format by 2 sets.
Yeah.
Right, and we also get a banning somewhere in here as well. I think we're supposed to see the yearly ban announcement that floats through here. Right, so this reprint... Yeah. This print wave of Modern Horizons 2 is auspiciously timed. Why is it coming in September as opposed to July or August, right before the Modern Pro Tour? Don't know.
That's strange.
That's the decision that was made by WotC. I think it's a red herring. I don't think it's a lead-in that we're going to get a Modern Pro Tour to kick the year off. I think, like we talked about this before, I think the Modern Pro Tour is best scheduled for the summer where we had it here or the fall. Either one, I think it's fine. But basically the 3rd or 4th Pro Tour in a year. I don't think the first one. I think the first one being Pioneer, great. Second one, Standard, awesome. Third one, Pioneer, Standard, don't care. 4th one, Modern. Seems like a great schedule.
And honestly, even if the next Pro Tour is Modern, if we're getting a reprint, I don't think it matters. The people that want those decks already have them, right? Because they've been playing it during this season.
Yeah.
When you get a reprint, what do you think is going to happen? They're not going to buy new decks. The format hasn't changed that much. It's still going to be the one ring the format like every other format. I just don't see the liquidity there. It's now is just absolutely we should be getting rid of it.
Yeah, heading into the reprint wave, absolutely, and then you can buy back in if you really want to when things turn around, when we get the announcement of the 2024 Pro Tours, and we hopefully get to see a Modern one on there, etc. So I think it's a good time to, remember that this stuff matters. Print waves matter. The timing of Pro Tours and thus RCQ seasons matters. And this is like a due diligence reminder. I think this is a really good look. So for me, overall, I'm excited to talk about this because it is super relevant to the timing of everything right now, starting with, like I said, literally last weekend. That was the last Pro Tour of this year. That was the Modern Pro Tour. And for the next September, October, November, December, almost 5 months.
5 months, yeah.
We do not have another Pro Tour. And at the end of those 5 months, we finally get a Pro Tour after 2 standard sets. So what are the odds it's going to be Modern? So for me, I think this is just a really good talking point, a really good platform, and a really good reminder. So thank you.
Yep.
So, anything else for this week?
Nope. Looking forward to next week and doing a recap of Gen Con because as I alluded to after the Origins episode, I hope that what happened at Origins is not the standard for large gaming events where you see a decline, but Gen Con is the one that will tell us.
There we go. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Haltime Reptar. You are
currently banned.
All right. We'll see you next week.